Hi everyone, my name is Carol. I am the founder of Parentally, and we are a platform dedicated to the well-being of new and future parents. And what we do is that we help pregnant couples and new parents to find all the extra care and support they may need during pregnancy, birth, postpartum, and the first years of parenthood. So we facilitate access to community support, professional support, and of course to information. And today we're going to talk about the Dutch school system. And many of you, the followers of Parentally, have asked us to do a session about that. So I'm very happy to have our guest today, Annebet van Mameren, who is an education consultant. I hope I pronounced your name correctly.
Yeah, perfect.
Great. Thank you so much, Annebet, for joining us today. Just for the little story, we know each other with Annebet because I did hire her when our first son was about to start school. So she really helped us.
Long time ago,
yes.
right?
Oh no, not so long ago. Oh my God, he's 10 already. He just turned 10 years old yesterday, and yes, long time ago. But yes, I'm very excited to talk about this topic, a very important one. But let's start with an introduction. I give you the floor, Annabeth. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. So, like you already said, my name is Annebet van Mameren, and almost 11 years ago, I started my business New to NL. So I help international families find a school for their children, and I advise about everything related to education. And it can be a Dutch school or an international school. So that's what we are going to talk about as well. And there's a lot more to tell about myself, but I think the viewers are more interested in what school they can choose for their children. So let's start with that.
Yes. Thank you so much. Thank you for introducing yourself. And yes, let's start with that. I think the first question, and maybe it's a broad one. Can you tell us a bit about the Dutch school system? What are the options? What types of education are available? How does it work?
Yeah. There are many different options in the Netherlands, which is nice because you have a lot of choice, but it also makes it complicated. So first, the parents have to choose between Dutch school or international school. And in general, if the parents are planning on staying for a longer time in the Netherlands and if the children are still small, then a Dutch school could be a good idea. But if the children are already a bit older, they already went to international school or school in English, and they're only here for short term, then international school would be better. So it really depends on the situation of the parents. Also, budget, of course, plays a role because the international schools are much more expensive. But there's also two types of international schools. So you have the subsidized schools and the private schools. The subsidized schools are partly subsidized by the Dutch government, which is very unique in the world. And they are about 5,000 euros for primary and around 7,000 for secondary, which is much cheaper than the private schools because they start with 18,000, 20,000 and then go up quickly. And the subsidized schools are officially only intended for families who live temporarily in the Netherlands. So when the parents apply, they will ask for how long are you planning on staying here? And if you say, well, maybe forever, then they will refer you to a Dutch school or a private international school. But once you're in, you're in. So they will not kick you out if you end up staying longer. So that's also important to know. And then if you choose for Dutch school, then there's again a lot of options because a lot of schools are based on the educational philosophy, so like Montessori, Dalton, Waldorf, some other types. Some schools are religious, although especially in the bigger cities, that means that they were established a long time ago, but they're not really religious anymore. But also that varies per school. And most children go to school that is close to home. So distance is important as well to consider. But of course, that's not the only thing. So it's like a big puzzle. You really have to match all the pieces together, which can be very difficult for international parents. So that is where I come in and I help them through the whole process.
Yes. And thank you very much for your answer. And at what age do the children start the primary school in the Netherlands?
Yeah, that's also a bit confusing because from age 5, children are obliged to go to school. However, most children already start when they are 4, and then they start the next day after their 4th birthday.
Okay.
So they start throughout the year. So if their birthday is in November, they start in November, and if the birthday is in March, they start in March, and so on. So there's no really first school day for everyone on the same day.
Yeah.
Which
Yes.
is funny.
Yes, it is funny, but I remember for my son, it was really like a coming of age, right? It's like they celebrate the 4th birthday and then they leave daycare and it's a big party.
Exactly.
So it's also quite nice. And I want to go back a little bit to the first question because you mentioned there were international schools and Dutch schools, and are there also like bilingual schools? I've heard of different types of
Yeah. Yes, there are bilingual schools, but most of them are Dutch schools where part of the curriculum is taught in English.
Okay.
And all the tests are the same as the fully Dutch schools. So that means when you don't speak Dutch at home and your child only speaks part of the time Dutch in school, then they're missing something.
Okay.
So a lot of international parents think that's sort of in between solution between Dutch and international school, but that's not really the way you should see it.
I see.
So if you don't speak Dutch at home and your child goes to bilingual school, then you will have to make sure that they will speak Dutch at the same level as the 100% Dutch schools. So maybe that means extra tutoring or after school activities or something to fill the gap. And that can be very difficult for some children. It also depends a lot on the child, how quickly they pick up the language and how much help they need outside of school. So, but in general, the bilingual schools are more intended for Dutch children who want to speak English early rather than the other way around.
I see. But in your experience, because one of the questions from our audience was how to decide between a Dutch and an international school. I think especially if both parents do not speak Dutch or not do not speak Dutch very well. How to choose what is the best.
Well, you don't have to speak Dutch to send your children to Dutch school, but of course it helps when you do. And there's a lot of children who don't speak Dutch at home who go to school, who go to Dutch schools, especially in Amsterdam. That's interesting fact that the biggest minority are people who are really Dutch, and especially for the younger ones, there are so many children who don't have a Dutch background, or maybe one Dutch and one non-Dutch parent, or it's a lot of mix, and so it is not really a problem. But some schools are a bit more equipped for international parents than others. So it's definitely a question you should ask to the school if they what they will do when your child has some difficulty with the language and you cannot help them at home, but also for the parents, because they will spend a lot of time in school as well. So if there's more international parents, it will be easier to communicate and you will better understand what's going on because other parents can explain it to you more easily. And also most Dutch people, they do speak English, but if you're the only one who doesn't speak Dutch, then they all have to switch for you. Probably you recognize that yourself as well. But if there's more international parents, then it's more common to switch to English and it's not really a problem. So it's definitely an option to go to Dutch school, but be careful which school you select for that. And you also don't want a school where too many children speak English at home, because then there's no incentive to learn Dutch really.
Yes.
And then the level of Dutch goes down, which can cause problems later on. So a nice mix between Dutch, English, other languages, that's the most ideal, I think.
And thank you. Another question actually we got from the audience is a very short one, but Some people expressed concern about not being able to help with homeworks if you don't speak Dutch at home. Is this, in your opinion, an issue in primary school?
Well, the good news is that most primary schools, they don't give any homework.
Yes.
And if they give homework, it's homework for the child and not really for the parents. So the school does not expect from the parents to help with homework. And if it's really needed, you could think of hiring a tutor for maybe a few hours, and then most cases that is enough. What is very important that parents keep on speaking their home languages.
Yes.
And make sure that the children get a broad understanding of that language, that they understand all the different details between the words, that they understand the bigger concepts, and then the children will be able to translate that to Dutch and back. So you help them in your own language so that the children understand what they're supposed to do in Dutch.
I see. Makes sense. Let's go back a little bit. So just before starting school, what are actually the steps to enroll the children in school in the Dutch system?
Yeah.
I mean,
that really depends on where you live, because every city has its own policies. Amsterdam is probably the most complicated because there is a lottery, and when the children are about 3 years and roughly 2 months, then there's the deadline for the lottery for this age group. And so you have to check all the information on the Schoolreizer Amsterdam website. And there they will exactly say, okay, this is your date of birth, this is the deadline. And then they will also tell you which are your priority schools. And that is also something that people in other cities have never heard about, and they don't need to. But in Amsterdam, you get priority for the 8 schools that are closest to your house. And then you have to make a list of 5 schools in order of your preference. And then through the lottery, it will be randomly decided which child goes to which school.
Oh, wow.
But in some smaller places, you just pick a school and you enroll your child there and you're done. So when you move to a Dutch city, then you really have to understand, okay, is there a lottery? Do I have priority schools? Can I register anywhere I want? Is there a deadline? So yeah, make sure to understand that properly so you don't miss any deadlines. And this lottery is only for children who are not 4 yet. So for children who are already 4 or older, then you have to call each school separately and ask for a place. And when a school is full, they're full. So even if you live next door, they can say, we have no place for your child. So ideally, you check the schools in the area where you would like to live and then see if there's availability. And if not, then either you have to commute further to a school, or maybe you want to find another home, which I know is not easy either. So it's a bit of a chicken or egg story sometimes, where to start.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what are the, like for first time enrollment to school, what are are there any important deadlines or requirements? How to keep track actually that, you're not missing anything and that you are not late for enrollment and all these things?
Yeah, so check the website of the municipality. And so apart from Amsterdam, there's also a lottery in Haarlem and Utrecht, The Hague, since recently also Amstelveen. So yeah, you really have to check how does it work here, because it's different from another city. And it's also a good idea to talk to other parents. So when you go to the playground or the park, you see people with younger children, just ask them, so how do you deal with this challenge, and do you already know a school? And maybe they have older children who already go to school, so then you can ask them how it works and which schools they would recommend. But stay on top of it, because age 3 is really the time that a lot of things are happening in terms of school registration.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was actually my next question. How do you actually choose the school? Because if I understand correctly, so you have the lottery and you have the eight first schools for which you have priority because they are the closest one.
Yes.
But then within these eight, so first question, within these eight, how do you choose? Like, can you do visits? And maybe if you have any tips or things to pay attention to. And the second question before I forget is, can you choose a school that is beyond your top eight?
Yeah. First question. So yeah, you can visit the
Yeah.
schools, and it's definitely recommended to do so because it's a very personal decision. It's like buying a house. So they can have very nice pictures on Fanda and very fancy description, but you set one foot inside and it's like, it's not for me. It's the same with schools. And all schools, they follow the same, what we call core objectives, so the same standards, but then they have a lot of freedom to fill in the details themselves. So, for example, these philosophies we talked about earlier, some schools are pretty small, others are bigger, some have a new building, others it's an old traditional building, some have big outside space, others use public playground. Yeah, so the population, so there's so many differences between the schools, and yeah, there's no ranking of schools, there's no the best school. So you really have to see which school is the best for your family, based on your values, your preferences, your needs, your wishes. And that can be different from your friends, your colleagues, your neighbors. So visit multiple schools so you can compare, you can get a feel. And most schools only allow new parents to visit during the generic information session, so with multiple other parents. They usually don't allow for private visits. So you really have to plan this ahead. On the website, they will tell you on which days they have the visits, then you should sign up. Sometimes they are full and then you have to pick another date. So that's where the planning starts. And usually they first give a presentation, which is often in Dutch. And then there are some teachers or sometimes students who guide the parents through the school. And then you can ask questions, and it's very common that they also have some children who speak English, and then they make an English speaking and a Dutch speaking group. But that really depends on the schools. If they do that, you already know they're more equipped for international parents if they have thought of that. And then yeah, you really have to get a feel for it. So I would recommend to make a list of pros and cons after each visit, because after the fourth visit, you have no idea anymore which is which. And yes, you may also put schools on the list where you don't have priority. However, the children who live closer by, they go first in the lottery. So you can only get the place there if they have enough places for all children who put that school at number one and live in the area. So, but you can try, and it depends, on the situation, if you can get a place there or not.
Thank you very much. And another question regarding actually, wait, I lost, I lost my thoughts. Yes, regarding the timeline, when do you actually start to visit schools? Like, what age of the children, approximately?
Yeah, I would say it's good to start around age 2.5.
Okay.
It's still very young, but then you already get some idea of the schools that are in your neighborhood. And so visit them, talk with other parents, just get a feel for them. And maybe you want to revisit a school when you have seen more, that you're like, oh, but how did they compare to the first one? And then you still have time to go back. And it takes a lot of discussions between the parents. Often parents have different ideas of education and what they want for their children. And so don't try and decide this in a week or something. And it's also a good idea to go to the school at pickup time and just see what kind of children are walking around there, how do the teachers interact with the children, but also the parents, because you will spend there a lot of time as well as a parent. So do you feel connection with the other parents? Do you think that you will be able to communicate with the parents and with the teachers? And if you don't feel any connection, then it's probably not a good school for your family. And maybe you want to talk to some of the parents who are waiting for their children. Just ask them if they like the school, but also ask them if they would recommend it to your family, because maybe they have completely different values or ideas, or maybe they say, yeah, for a Dutch family like ours, it's a nice school, but there's not many international families, so I'm not sure if you will be happy. So at least you know it from their perspective. Still, you can have a different opinion, of course, but that is what other parents tell you. And how do the parents interact with each other while they're waiting? Are they very busy on their mobile phones the whole time, or are they talking to each other? So that already tells you a lot about the atmosphere. And also, who are picking up the children? Is it mostly the parents or nannies, or do they go to after school care, or do you see one parent with a bunch of children going home? So maybe that's a play date or birthday party. So also those things tell you a lot about, how they act in the school and how the atmosphere is like, and if you would like that or not.
Yes, that is so useful. That is so insightful indeed. It is very important to also look not only like when you go to visit, but also look what's the atmosphere also among the parents and everything.
It's very subjective, but very important at the same time. So yeah,
absolutely. Thank you so much for this great tip. In general, do parents bring their children when they visit the schools, or is it not done?
In most cases, it is not allowed.
Yes.
And they will specify that on the website. But yeah, you don't really want to bring your children really, because there's a lot of information that's thrown at you, and you have to understand what they will say. And yeah, a lot of small children, they run off, they start shouting, they are hungry, sleepy, whatever. And then you need to pay attention to them, and you miss everything that the principal is telling you. And you're disturbing the other parents as well.
Yes,
so yeah, that's sometimes I go to a lot of school visits, and sometimes people do bring their children, but in most cases it doesn't work well, and they have to leave or play in the hallway until the meeting is over or something like that. So it's not really beneficial for anyone.
Yes, that's very true. I want to go back a little bit to one of the first questions that I asked, and where you were already talking about how schools can support international children. In your experience, do the Dutch schools offer specific type of support or resources for international children, especially those who have not been to Dutch daycare and who don't speak Dutch at all?
Yeah, that depends on the school. So when children are 6 or older, they first have to go to newcomer class to learn Dutch, and only then they can go to regular school. When they are 4 or 5, they can just start at the regular school straight away. The idea is that the children learn through play, and by talking to the Dutch children, they will pick up the language, and they're fluent when they are in group 3 at age 6, when they start to read and write in Dutch. So that is the idea, but sometimes children do need more support. And some schools, they can indeed provide this support. They can get a subsidy from the municipality to pay for what they call an NT2 teacher, which means Dutch as an additional language. That's for a few hours per week. But not every school has this this amount of money available, or they don't have enough children who have difficulty with Dutch that they can afford a teacher specifically for that. So that is really something you have to ask. And then it really depends how they communicate with the parents as well, if they don't speak Dutch. So that is another thing you have to ask, because often the children pick it up and then they speak better Dutch than the parents.
Yes.
And so that can be a bit difficult as well. And but yeah, that also depends on the teacher. So some teachers, maybe they traveled a lot and they speak fluently English, or maybe they have an English speaking partner, and for them it's not a problem at all. But it can also be that there's an older teacher who didn't really learn to speak English when they went to teacher training school, and they don't feel comfortable speaking English, and everything in between. So it really depends. And it also depends on the other parents, because there can also be a lot of parents who don't speak Dutch nor English, and they have to speak Dutch to communicate. So they have to make it work, and for them it can be a bit difficult to understand that they are forced to learn Dutch, and then the teacher speaks in English with the other parents who speak English, which is not really fair. So yeah, it also depends on that. It can also be that the teacher says, okay, I speak in Dutch to you and you can answer in English, or day-to-day conversations we can have in English, but when there's really something difficult, something that we really have to discuss, then it's better if you bring a translator. So yeah, it varies from school to school, from teacher to teacher. So that is definitely something to consider as well. And maybe for the children, if they need more Dutch support, which is not provided by school, you could also think of some after-school tutoring, or some other ways to make sure that Dutch is up to the right level.
And let's look at the other side. Thank you very much for this answer. Let's look at parents who don't speak Dutch. In your experience, is it expected from parents to be involved in the life of the school? You already mentioned that in general there is no homeworks, but at school, what is the role of the parents?
They often ask for parent volunteers, for example, to accompany a group on a school trip, or to sort the books in a library, or to decorate a class for Christmas. And all those things you can do without speaking Dutch, really. And I would really recommend that, because in that way you get to know the teacher better, and the other parents and the classmates of your children. So you feel more involved in that way. There are some things what they ask parents for that you really need to speak Dutch. For example, reading with a small group of children in group 3. If you don't speak fluent Dutch, then that is not for you. But there's still a lot of things that they really would be happy when you offer your help for. And it depends a bit on the school how much involvement they expect from the parents. So that is also something to inquire about as well. It's not that they really oblige the parents. So if you both work full time and you are abroad a lot, then they don't ask you to take off work to do that. But if you can, it's very much appreciated. And the children are usually very happy as well when they see their parents helping, and so it also makes them proud. So if you can, it would be much appreciated. And then there's also more official ways of helping. So there's a parent council and a participation council. And I've been a member of the parent council for 10 years now, the whole duration of my children in primary school. And then you organize a lot of events and parties and gatherings for the parents, and we support the teachers sometimes. And most of the meetings are in Dutch, but when there's an English-speaking parent, they sometimes join, and we talk in English for that matter, what they want to talk about. So that could be an option as well. And the participation council is a bit more formal. So they also talk about the policies for the schools, and they talk with the school board. And usually that's a bit more difficult if you don't speak Dutch. But if your level of Dutch is decent, then that could be something interesting to take part in as well. So there's definitely options for parents to be involved if they want to.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I believe it's a choice. And when you put your children in the Dutch school, it's also, I mean, it's really helpful to speak Dutch at some point if you really want to be, like you mentioned, to be involved and to understand, and makes things so much easier. And so we were talking about basisschool, the primary school. Would you like to tell us a bit, because I think the focus was more on primary school for this discussion, but would you like to give us just a little bit of information about what comes after the primary school?
Yeah, that's also complicated.
Yes.
And so the primary school goes from age 4 to 12, so group 1 to 8. And after group 8, the children go to secondary school. So there's no middle school or junior high or anything. It's just primary and then secondary. And there's different levels of secondary school. And now that we can fill a whole other interview with
Yes.
that. But, the idea is there's 3 different levels. So you have VMBO that takes 4 years, and that is more vocational education. Then HAVO is 5 years, and that is more generic education. And VWO is takes 6 years, and that is pre-university education. But what we call university is research university, and after HAVO you could go to University of Applied Sciences, which we call HBO. But in a lot of countries that is just all called university. So that is where a lot of confusion comes in for international parents. And a lot of secondary schools, they combine different levels in the first year, or sometimes the second year and the third year as well. And then the streaming takes place later. And after one level, you can also move up to the next level. So there's a lot of movement, a lot of trajectories, and the idea is that everyone gets a diploma in an area that suits them at the level that suits them, and they can always move up later if they want to and if they're able to. And in the final year of primary school, so in group 8, the children get an advice, a recommendation for secondary school level. And first, the teacher gives this recommendation, and they look at the whole child. So they look at the test results from group 6 onwards, so group 6, 7, and 8, but also the child's motivation, their interest, their ambition, intelligence. So the whole package. And then the children take the transition test, which is not an exam. I really have to emphasize that, because a lot of international parents say, oh, the children take an exam, and based on that, they go to secondary school. Now, it's not how it works. It's an aptitude test, and if the test results are higher than the teacher's advice, then they can go to a higher level of secondary education. And if the test results are lower, then the teacher's advice stays. So you should see this test as a sort of second opinion to check if the teacher gave the right recommendation. And then you have to apply for secondary school, which also depends again on where you live, and especially in Amsterdam, that's very complicated. So there's a lot of things to consider when your child is in group 6, 7, 8. Then you start inquiring about the secondary schools and visit them, and that's a whole different story.
Yes, I think it could require a whole another session just to talk about that. But I do actually have still kind of a controversial question, because already when choosing the basisschool, the primary school, is it already possible in some way to check how the school prepares for these different levels, like, to see maybe the distribution of the number of children who go to the first level, the second, the third? Is there a way to compare that?
Well, yes and no. There are websites where you can see the test scores of the previous year. But I always say that's just a starting point. It just tells you a little part about the school. because those are results of children who were 12 last year, and a lot of things can happen until your child is 12. It's not that the school prepares for secondary school. So it's not that they say we want to prepare for the lower level or the higher level. It really depends on the population and how well they perform. Some schools, they're very academically focused, and they really teach to the test to a certain extent. So in this transition test, they mainly test for Dutch language, so spelling and grammar and comprehensive reading and math. And maybe they only do that and just a little bit of other things, and they have high scores. But is that a good school then? And maybe you find it important that they do extra music, and they go lots on excursions, and they also teach English from group 1, and but all those things they don't test for. So what makes a good school is very personal. And the test scores are also very much related to the educational level of the parents. So when the parents are native Dutch speakers and they went to university, and they have a strong vocabulary, and they take their children to museums and read a lot with them, and they pay for tutors, or maybe those children have higher scores. But I don't think that's really the added value of the school. And maybe a school that has a population of where a lot of parents don't speak Dutch at home, and maybe a lot of them didn't go to a higher level of education, and then the school has to teach a lot more things to those children. They don't come with all this vocabulary when they enter the school. So then if their test results are higher than average, then the added value of that school is much higher than the first school I mentioned. So it really depends what you find important. But some parents, I know, they just want to compare the schools, just like this is the best school because they have the higher test scores. That's really not how it works. And even if the majority of the class is not performing too well, if your child is very intelligent and very motivated, they can still get a higher advice and still go to a higher level. And but it's also a bit like if a child, if they like to become a plumber or a hairdresser, or there's a lot of very good jobs for which you need vocational education. So not everyone has to go to university. So some children, they want to do that, and others they don't. So it's also which options do you let them choose from, and if it's not really sure yet, then I would recommend a bigger school with all different levels, and then over the years it will turn out which is the right level for this child, and they can still go up or sometimes down if it's not the right level initially. So the system is very flexible.
And I think you like that you're saying this is I think the most important part of approaching this Dutch school system is that when you don't really know how it works, you always feel like when your child reaches 12 years old, he has to get the right advice or he will be stuck. And my understanding from doing some research and also from your answer is that it's still possible to move one way or another to another path if it's not working. But it's true that this question about which kind of recommendations children get at this or that school is always one question that comes very, very often when it's about choosing schools.
And it is young. Age 12 is young to decide that, but you should see it. The decision is about through which door they will enter the secondary school, not through which door they will eventually leave many years later. So a lot of things can still change. So it's just how you start the next phase.
Yes. And that's very beautifully said. Sorry. And actually, I think this system is really not easy to understand when you are not familiar with the Dutch system.
It
And
is
for
complicated.
parents, yes,
Yeah.
can you share maybe some resources that can help parents better understand or get engaged with the Dutch school system?
Well, my
Yeah.
website, of course. I write a lot of articles and record videos about the various aspects of the Dutch education system. So
Mhm,
new2nl.com, you can
mhm,
find a lot of information. I also give webinars about a lot of different things. Maybe that's good to mention. So tomorrow evening at 8, I will give a webinar about the primary school and then especially the lottery in Amsterdam.
awesome.
So for parents who have a child who is 3 or a bit younger, then that's very good webinar to attend. So you know what's the next step, and talk a lot with other parents,
Hmm.
and but always ask them uh, what they would suggest in your situation.
Hmm.
Because, for example, a lot of Dutch parents, they don't know about the newcomer class, so they will tell you just go to this school nearby. But if your child is already 6 and they don't speak Dutch, they
Hmm.
will not be accepted at that school. So always ask, yeah, but is it also good in my situation?
Hmm.
And also the Dutch education group on Facebook is a very good
Okay.
source. So a lot of international parents who communicate
Hmm.
in English and ask questions about schools. So I'm very active there as well, answering those questions. And if you don't know something, just ask for it.
Hmm.
I've seen a lot of parents, they assumed that things were the same way as their home country, and then they were um, running into a lot of issues. So it's not copy paste. A lot of things are different here. I'm not saying it's better or worse, it's just different. So you really have to understand
Hmm.
how it works.
Mm. But I think it's not easy when you have your first child. You cannot know what you don't know. So even when you
True.
visit the school, it's already a struggle to know what am I going to ask, what do I want
Yeah,
to know, because
true.
you really don't know. But I think you touched a lot of very interesting things. And thank you so much for sharing all these insights and all this expertise. And this live has been recorded. Of course, someone asked in the comment, it has been recorded, and I will share it on our YouTube channel. Annebet, would you like to tell us a bit more about your services and how you help parents? Not through the group uh, events, but individually.
Yeah. So I have a lot of different packages, and I really try to suit the needs of the parents. So some parents just have a few questions, and then I have an ad hoc call for them. And other parents, they hire me to help them through the whole process. So that's the all-inclusive package. And then we first talk about their family, the ages
Mhm.
of the children, how long they plan to stay in the Netherlands, what type of school they are attending now, what they would like in the Netherlands, and everything that comes with it. Then I identify the schools that could be suitable for this family. I contact the schools to ask if they have a place because a lot of schools are
Mhm.
full. And
Oh,
and I
wow.
explain to the school how it all works, what the family needs, and then they say if that would be a good match or not. I set up a meeting with the schools that do have a place.
Oh,
I
wow.
write a report about the schools so they can really compare and they understand what the differences are between the schools. I help with the application form, which is usually in Dutch
Mhm.
and also difficult to understand sometimes, even with Google Translate. Yeah, it's sometimes difficult to understand what the school is asking from you.
Mhm.
And sometimes I go with the family on a school visit. That's extra service. But I always give a checklist with questions.
Mhm.
Like you said, sometimes you don't know what you don't know, so you don't know what to ask. So with this checklist, they know better what to ask
Mhm.
for when they visit the school. So I really guide them through the whole process and make sure that the children are happy at their school. And most of the children I helped find a school, they're still at the same school
Ah, nice.
compared to the one I found for them a long time ago. So that's a good sign, I think.
Yeah.
And a lot of families, I helped them a few years ago find a primary school, and now they contact me again because their children are ready for secondary school.
Which I'm going to do
exactly
very soon.
And then it's like, okay, how does this work? So yeah, it's very interesting to see them back and see how the children have grown and how they have settled in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
Because most of my clients, they're still abroad, and then yeah, a couple of years later, they've become more Dutch. They've decided to stay here, and they are enjoying it. So it's I really like that.
Yes, I can imagine. Thank you so much, Annebet. It was really great and it was really really helpful, and I think it's going to be extremely valuable for all the parents who listen to this session today. I think we can be all very happy to have someone like you who we can rely on when it comes to the Dutch school system, because it's so complicated.
It is.
Like I said, this live has been recorded. I will share it on the YouTube channel along with all the contact details, information from Annebet if you want to reach her and visit her website. Also about the webinar tomorrow. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this session. Please do not forget to subscribe to not miss our future videos. I wish you all a very good day. Goodbye, Annebet. Thank you so much.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye. Bye. Bye.
Very nice being here.
Thank you
Thank you
so much. Bye.
Bye.